From the day that we're born, we're on the path to straightness. We're on the path of heterosexuality. And I mean, I think everything that happens to us along the way just leads to that assumption that we are straight.
I think it means just to be the norm. And I think it's what's assumed of everybody. So couched in that is that it is the majority, and there's a minority that doesn't even have to be considered if you're a part of the majority.
I never used any term to describe myself.
Where heterosexuality gets played out is in the assumptions of heterosexuality more than anything else. And in the willingness of people who are not heterosexual to kind of silence themselves, or not call attention to the fact that they don't fit into those.
Being black, being a woman, it's always being outside of this norm, but being straight, I never had to question it. Nobody questioned how I chose to love, or how I chose to show that part of myself. So I just, it was like invisible, basically.
When I was reading through the email questions, trying to think about some of my answers to the questions that you posed, and I was really struggling because I realized these were real issues that I had not thought about before, and that sort of helped me come up with my definition of what it is to be straight, because to be straight is to not have to think about those issues.
And I remember as growing up in elementary school, we were, when we first learned how to write and print, well, we were asked to write and print within the confines of broad lines. And back in first grade, we had big papers and big lines and big pencils. And in some ways, that's how straightness is. Straightness is a way that our schools, our institutions in terms of church, our workplaces, our families, already have the lines already set out in the paper. And it is presumed that each of us will inscribe our identities and our characters within those broad lines. And those broad lines are straight.
I don't think it needs to be taught, and I don't think it ever was taught to me. I think it's just an assumption that's made by everybody.
I don't remember being taught to be straight or what it means to be straight. I don't remember anything in my upbringing that I can point to and say, oh, that was the moment where I realized, that, how to love a man or what my sexuality meant.
You are taught straightness by not being taught. In other words, the world around you gives you a sense of the norm. It's reinforced daily.
Well, it's society teaching people what it means to be normal.
From the day that we're born, we're on the path to straightness. We're on the path of heterosexuality. And I mean, I think everything that happens to us along the way just leads to that assumption that we are straight.
It's like the question of, do you put the baby in pink or do you put the baby in blue? And then there are a whole set of expectations that come along with that, one of which is that, blue baby will be attracted to pink baby eventually.
From fairy tales at, our youngest ages to TV shows, sort of media conceptions, I think it's considered to be the norm.
Just simple reading selections, basal readers, what is, permission slips, dear mom and dad, that kind of just, again, the assumption that this is the way every child's family is, I think really comes through as a hidden curriculum.
Remember the game of life? I mean, I haven't played it for years, but there's certain things that you follow and you go through and so forth, and I'm sure if you look back at that, there's no route that says, come out, or the gay game of life over here, or take this route, or pick up the card and said, oops, you're no longer heterosexual, and so the game of life is not coded as heterosexual, but it certainly is. And I don't think there's anything that says, well, here we're teaching kids to be straight. It's just understood this is the way life is.
And songs too. Think about when you're a teenager and you're listening, all the love songs, like they're always heterosexual.
I think part of it is what I learned about straightness, and part of it is what I didn't learn about gay and lesbian and bisexual lifestyles. I think they teach it by the presence of one and the absence of the other. And it would have been a completely different educational experience if both were presented. I think in every form of the media, in the children's books we have, in the magazines we see, in television, in movies, every story that's told to us about who are important people in the world and who are people that we should aspire to be and what's the kind of work and lifestyle we should aspire to have, 99% is heterosexual, or sexuality is either assumed or not acknowledged as being anything but heterosexual.
It's not as though there's ever any class that says, okay, kids, it's now time for heterosexual history or heterosexual English or heterosexual math or heterosexual health education, but in fact, that's kind of what it is. And as long as you don't have the examples and the discussion being chosen from a wide variety, you've got a curriculum that ends up being biased, just as years of people of color have said, hey, wait a minute, isn't this white history and white math and white English and so forth? And the fact is, you say, well, yeah, as a matter of fact. We didn't think in those terms, but in fact it is. And so it's, again, this kind of notion of it's just the way the world works becomes implicated into a lot of this. Or the understanding of the way the world works becomes implicated into a lot of this.
When it was more explicit to me about straightness or whatever, was this pressure to be more sexual, to be with boys, and you had to be with boys. Girls had to be with boys.
I remember when my daughter was just like one, I had this friend, and they had, each of them had sons around my daughter's age, and the father in this couple would always come in and look and say, I wonder which one, Phoebe will marry. I think, well, why doesn't Jeff and Scotty get married?
And then there were games at lunch like Manhunt, Woman Hunt, or Catch and Kiss, where, the boys would chase the girls and you had to run away, and if you got caught, you got kissed. And I remember people playing at getting married in the courtyard, which was a big deal.
Yeah, I'd say probably middle school, around 7th grade, when we were out of elementary, because we had middle school of 7th, 8th, where there was an immense pressure to start to be sexual, I guess. And I think that's probably when, to have a boyfriend, to, have that kiss before you get on the bus, like all that kind of stuff.
But my biggest school experience with stuff like that was in 8th grade. My best friend, Anya, and I spent every second together. I mean, we were best friends. And our families were friends, and we would have sleepovers all the time, and that's just the way that we were. So this boy, Jeff Goldstein, for whatever reason, I don't even remember how it started, but all of a sudden, one day, everybody was saying, oh, Luba and Anya are lesbians. And I was like, such a big deal. And Jeff Goldstein was so mean about it.
I never thought about my privilege in being straight, that the way I choose to love, nobody questions it, and I never questioned it.
Straightness is not simply, I don't think, simply defined in terms of one's sexual attraction to the same gender, or in this case to the other gender. I think it's also defined in terms of gender roles.
Gender and sexuality have everything to do with each other. Mm-hmm. And this is how straightness gets constructed, because as a little girl, I was supposed to dream my whole life of getting married. I never had that dream. And for 20 years, I didn't tell anybody I didn't have that dream.
Well, straightness also, creates these categories in which I've just created. We talk about two categories, boys and girls, as if there's nothing in between. And in fact, there's lots of space, there's lots of grayness, there's lots of curves, there's lots of queerness in who we are as individuals and human beings. And I think straightness, what it does is it flattens out all that human diversity of who we are in terms of human beings, and it flattens out to a dimensionality of maleness and femaleness defined and prescribed in rather narrow cultural ways.
We're enamored with binaries, sort of male or female, or even the notion of opposite gender. I thought that was interesting, because I've begun less and less to use opposite and maybe just use other. Or but our language sort of betrays itself all the time.
The Kinsey scale is a continuum, and yet even in the LGBT community, it's often cited in terms of binary. You have 10% who are this way and 90% who are this way.
People try to sort of pass under the straight category. For people who have relationships with both men and women, they're not straight. But if you sort of are mostly date one and sort of sometimes date the other, you can sort of pass under the straight category, but don't let anyone find out, because that pushes you out of the category and you lose all of your privilege right away.
I think that there are people who are bisexually active who identify as heterosexual.
There is a way where the kind of fixity of the categories is very sort of reassuring and beneficial both to straight people and to gay men and lesbians. You know, in other words, there's kind of a way in which saying there is this divide that's here, there is this community that's here, you know, and there's a community that then offers, you know, sort of solace and mobilization and comfort and so forth on both sides.
I mean, economically, you lose power. You lose power politically. You lose power within your own family and relations. We have multiple mechanisms, and we have legal mechanisms to ensure that we are all clear about the rules and regulations.
Tax breaks, economic benefits at work, wills that you can leave your spouse, and that to me is self-construction of, but I think the thing that's in my fate is how much straight people don't know that.
I could be barred from teaching.
They don't get any marriage privileges, they don't get, you know, they can't be a beneficiary. In some states they can be a beneficiary of life insurance, like they don't get health insurance through their partner. And some of these couples have been together for 30, 40 years, and they don't get any of the benefits. Like, I mean, I could think of so many examples, like say your significant other got in a really bad accident, and unless there's some documentation that you're a domestic partner, they won't even let you in the friggin' hospital room unless there's someone to verify that. Not someone who you share all your life with as your partner.
His partner works with a lot of high school kids and wants to keep his job. They don't want to have their car torched. They don't want to be physically attacked. And all of these things, which may vary from community to community, are things that one doesn't have to worry for one's safety of whatever, whether that's physical, whether that's emotional, whether that's intellectual.
I think level of physical safety, level of physical comfort in a lot of situations. I think certainly in terms of legal protections, ability to pursue relationships and marriage with your person of choice. I think in terms of the equality or inequality of not being able to see your story, not being able to see the whole range of role models and experiences and opportunities that truly reflect your own story and the story that you'd like to see for yourself. I think that is a tremendous inequality and a tremendous injustice.
One of the advantages of being, one of the advantages I perceive of being straight is you get a chance to practice being in love at a young age. Like you get a chance to date people when you're in middle school and have it work out, not work out. You have a chance to do that in high school, have it work out, not work out. And when you get to the point, I mean, I sort of feel in my own experience that I just sort of got cheated out of, you know, a prom, dating, middle school, high school experience.
I can walk down the street with my boyfriend, hold his hand and give him a kiss and not think twice. Yeah. That's it. I don't think twice. Yet, if I were walking down the street with a girlfriend, I would totally think twice about grabbing her hand and giving her a kiss. And it also means that when I coach soccer, my boyfriend came to the games and my co-coach's girlfriend came to the games, and he could give me a hug after the game and they didn't touch after the game. So I had the privilege, and I had the privilege of sharing with my students, with my team, with the members of my team, my personal life, someone who I love and care about, and just share it without even thinking twice. And being seen by the administrators, because I've been in a long-term relationship, as a positive role model for the girls, which and having that be an addition and having it be an added bonus even when applying for jobs within especially a boarding school environment. And I say I'm in a long-term relationship. We've been together almost 3 years. You know, and whatever, I think he's going to move, whatever, wherever I am. And they think that they see that as stability. They think, oh, that's great. She's such a good role model. This is what she's bringing to us. That's privilege.
Our world is so catered to heterosexual love is okay to show, and homosexual love is not. It really dawned on me, well, heterosexuals are in their face all the time. I mean, even when you're walking down the street and it's springtime, like you see couples, heterosexual couples, kissing each other, holding each other all the time, and that's okay. Sometimes you may be like, well, chill out, get a room, but for the most part, you just walk on by, and that is such a privilege when you look at it in terms of homosexuals, where when they do that, when they want to hold each other's hands or, kiss or anything like that in public, it is so, everybody's either just looking at you or
you're seen as being inappropriately personal or political.
It's fine, but just keep that stuff at home.
There's no conversation about that. So there's silence or silencing a lot.
I think that when you're bringing up the institution of marriage, it's really interesting because that is part of heterosexual privilege, to engage in that institution and to have the wedding and to have all the tax breaks or whatever comes with marriage.
There are excuses that are made, shall we say, for heterosexuals, which would not be made for gay people. So that in other words, if there is this kind of set of assumptions, in terms of, say, oh, he has a sick child, or, he's been having trouble with his wife and so forth, those kinds of excuses are easily understood in ways that, say, for example, if I said I have a good friend who died of AIDS, in last year or something like that, and I was part of the support group and so forth, a hypothetical example, that would not have been understood in quite the same terms. And so it's again this kind of presumption of what are the experiences with which the vast majority of the people who are in an institution can understand, and of course that becomes reinforcing.
What they are is human, and they construct knowledge, and from their perspective, for us is what we do.
To me, straightness means having power, having a very clear articulation of where one fits in society, having models of family, what a family is, having a history that tells you that you are the norm. It's a relaxing experience because you're never confronted. So it's all about who has power. And in this case, it's a lot of power that goes unchallenged.
The issues about straightness are issues about power, issues about who's doing the naming.
There are so many women here, and we constantly talk about, oh, who's getting married and who's getting engaged and who's dating who, and it's always assumed that it's the opposite sex.
I've had numerous experiences where people come up to me and say, oh my God, Lupa, everybody thinks you're a lesbian. Like it's this huge deal. And the way that they say it almost makes it feel like it is a big deal. Like, oh, this is something that people talk about, and that the first reaction they expect from me is sort of a defense, like, I am not.
In classes, people aren't comfortable to speak openly about whatever issue it is. And it's privilege for people who don't have to think twice about whatever issue it is to speak. And that in itself sets up a hierarchy within the institution.
In terms of classroom discussions, I think the little amount that it is discussed just goes to reify that straightness is the way things are supposed to be.
Here at Harvard, they are so good. They are such masters at giving lip service to diversity. I truly believe that they have, how is the best school of education? It's the best school of education in telling people that we're diverse.
I I think we have conceptualized diversity in a polemic between whites and African Americans. I think we have realized that we have a shared problem that I would call inequality in power. Many people, most people, are left out. So until we begin to speak about this issue as a component of a diversity conversation and a diversity struggle, we're really not having the conversation on diversity.
For instance, they have a recruitment for people of color. So I called the admissions office and said they had to recruit gay people. And they said no. And if we are really serious about diversity, we should recruit gay people, because gay people here we just happen.
I think the most important privilege is not realizing you have a privilege.
I was about to enter the school. This is a wonderful environment. And coming in, I heard students, no teachers around of course, calling each other faggots as a joke. So even within the best environments, there's an accepted language that is brutal to students.
And it's something that I struggle with as an educator, because I'm not even sure all the ways that I'm sure I do it and don't even realize it. And I haven't even figured it out yet. You know, what are the ways that I privilege one group in my classroom through language, through questions, through relationships, through whatever.
It was hard for me teaching in Peru to not be expected to say, when you find the woman that you're going to marry, to the boys, and when you find the man, to the girls. And when I would say, when you find your partner, I mean, they're 17 years old, and they still found that to be ridiculous of me to even say it. They're like, you know, it's not the language we use.
Faculty, you know, I lived in a girls' dorm. How many times did I, you know, in gathering the girls around, ask them, so what do you think about NSYNC and Backstreet Boys? Who's the cutest? Or, you know, who are you dating, Lisa? And you know, tell me, girls, who's the cutest guy on campus now? All of this was my attempt to come to their level as teenagers and engage in just what I would consider typical teenage girl talk. But the reason I considered it that is because you know, I'm a heterosexist. I was a practicing heterosexist.
Do you see it? I mean, I'm trying to imagine someone doing it. I don't know of any example where someone has relinquished straight privilege.
I think that it would be important for the school to try to get a sense of that, to sort of do some things that might give us some information about whether what gay students' experiences like or here, to get some sense of, are these issues covered in the curriculum, how are they covered? So maybe some information gathering about the state of these issues at the school in order to sort of assess, you know, where we are at.
The best thing an ally could do is to talk about things. You know, I was at a workshop and they talked about how what's unspeakable becomes unmanageable. And especially with kids take a message from what you say and from what you don't say. So to not talk about something, you send a message. Like, this is something that's not talkable, not speakable, and unmanageable.
Someone had scrawled a very hateful message, and immediately, within a half hour, there were sheets up for community comments. What do you think about this? What should we do about this? And it became a very communal learning experience for the whole 400 students who were there.
I would like to see teachers intervening when small children are playing and they say to one another, you know, you can't marry a girl, or you know, and saying, wait, why? Then I think in our textbooks, our social science and our social studies textbooks, where there are units on families and units on society, and there's a lot that can be challenged in how those subjects are taught.
I would say to begin with, you do not need to look for the social movement that will happen. I think it happens in daily life with small steps but consistent steps. I would say that we need to accept as allies our role as participants and not leaders, which is very hard in the sense that we are always assuming we have the answer, we can help and construct the movement, and in many instances what we should do is be quiet and follow instructions.
And I don't think that as a straight ally you can sit back and just assume that it's the responsibility of people who are not straight to educate.
But it's so horrible to have someone who's been through so much pain kind of like make sure you remember it.
Yeah. I guess the closest I could come to, and it's an odd example, would be PFLAG. You know, because in many ways that the kind of ways in which these people are very moving, and not simply in the way of saying, he's my son or she's my daughter and I'm going to love him or her no matter what. It's actually these people moving to an affirming aspect about sexual diversity that does not fit their histories, it does not fit their current identity and so forth. And these are amazing people. You know, the ways in which they then say, look, and they can speak with a particular authority, you know, and so there is sort of a realpolitik there. But there's also a way in which you look at these folks and say, here are people who are as straight identified and live as straight a world and heterosexual a world as could be imaginable. And yet they are the ones who are out there kind of affirming possibilities of sexual diversity. And I guess I think of those sort of the leaders of PFLAG, you know, who are out there not simply of saying, well, don't discriminate against my son, you know, or don't discriminate against my daughter, but actually saying, you know, this is okay.
We've talked about this Valentine's Day dance before, and I think that an example of relinquishing heterosexual privilege in that instance would be instead of asking to be matched up with a person of a particular gender, or either male or female, you would be matched up completely without regard to that.
I was just talking with a straight friend of mine last week, and he was talking about his brother, who was living with another man, and he was the only one who had enough guts to say, well, are you gay? And the brother said, no, we're just sharing this place. Now, first of all, A, I didn't believe that, but I didn't say this. And then B, the thing is that, well, then my friend said, oh, well, I'm sorry to have insulted you. And I said, well, thank you very much. Why didn't you say, I'm sorry to have commended you? You know, and so you see, that's the kind of point that comes back. If you actually get to the point of being able to say, well, no, I'm sorry, I mistook you, you know. I thought better of you. I thought you were gay type of thing. You know, that's where you would get to.
An ally in terms of issues of sexuality is different because you are immediately then as an ally, for some people, cast in the, quote, suspect role. Because it's almost in some ways like, you know, having to prove again your heterosexuality, to assert in some ways that, no, you are a fit within the normative profile of what it means to be a man and a woman.
I would be a part of that movement and not really care what people thought about my sexual preference.
Here would be an interesting challenge, and there's some people who've written about this. You know, if you say, no, gay relationships are not as good as straight relationships, you know, something, they're better. And if you said there's actually a way in which, you know, the negotiation between two partners of equal sort of gender status could lead to a more just and fulfilling relationship.
Normal. I guess assumed.
Expected.
Accepted.
Unquestioning.
Easy.
Protected.
Safe.
Invisible.
Visible.
Invisibly visible.
Present.
Limited.
Ignorant.
Ignorant.
Privileged.
Privileged.
George Bush.
Power.
The norm.
The norm.
Normal.
Normalizing.
Pervasive.
The assumption.
Easier.
Perpetuated.
Visible.
Undiscussed.
Ignored.
Silent.
Silence.
Questioning.
Work in progress.
Normal. I guess assumed.
Expected.
Accepted.
Unquestioning.
Easy.
Protected.
Safe.
Invisible.
Visible.
Invisibly visible.
Present.